Hi, folks. Welcome. We are so pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. We'll get started in just a moment. We've got a lot of really exciting content to cover today. We've got plenty of time saved for questions and answers, but we see lots of people still flooding on in, so we'll give it another minute before we get started. All right, let's do this. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar, Creative, Accessible Federal Funding to Advance Safe, Active Travel for Kids and Communities. We are so pleased to have you here today. A little bit about Safe Routes Partnership, who's hosting the webinar. What we do is we work to advance safe walking and rolling to and from school and in everyday life for people of all ages, abilities, disabilities. And we do this work to improve the health and well-being of people of all races, ethnicities, income levels, abilities, and disabilities with the goal of building healthy, thriving, equitable communities for everyone. How do we do that? We do that in a number of ways, including advancing policies and increasing funding for things like safe routes to school, walking, and bicycling. We work to nurture and develop and advance the safe routes to school community through program development and implementation and building strong relationships and partners with local advocates, community leaders, and neighborhoods. We do this through providing one-on-one consulting and coaching to communities all across the country in rural, urban, suburban communities everywhere. And we share our deep expertise and learn from one another. And we share out what we learn through things like this, like webinars, as well as tons of freely available resources you can find on our website, reports, fact sheets, toolkits, etc. And a little bit about me. My name is Marisa Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the managing director of policy and partnerships, where I have worked for almost 9 years. And my area of expertise is policy and funding. And so why am I here today? We have been involved in watching and participating and advocating for policy change at the federal level. We have been tracking all of the amazing programs created through the bipartisan infrastructure law, including those that we helped lobby and advocate for. And once the law passed, it's really become our vocation, our passion to teach people about these opportunities, make sure you know about the incredible funding and policy opportunities available to create safe, walkable communities. And one of the ways that I've been thinking about this is that I have read the NOFO, I have read every addendum to the NOFO, watched every webinar, asked the questions, poured over the DOT website, and really want to serve as a translator to try to make it less jargony and more accessible. Some of you may have participated in a similar webinar we did over the summer with the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grants, where we, again, really tried to take, hey, this is this new program. People don't really know what it is. How do we make it feel real for people so that you can feel ready to take action to submit an application? And so that's really what we're here to do today, is to make the Safe Streets and Roads for All program feel accessible, exciting, and actionable. We want you to leave here knowing that it is for your community, what steps you need to take to get this money to improve traffic safety in your community. So with that, let's get into it. I know that you all read the webinar description and you read, okay, there's some creative, accessible funding that might help my community and advance some of our goals. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions here, and I want you to think about whether or not these are things your community is interested in. Is your community interested in preventing death and serious injury on roads and streets for all roadway users, including people walking and bicycling? Is your community interested in understanding equity concerns related to current street design and crash patterns? Is your community interested in analyzing traffic safety for specific segments of your community's population? Maybe kids, maybe older adults, maybe non-car users, maybe people with disabilities. Are you interested in engaging residents in your community to understand where and why they don't feel safe traveling throughout their community? Do you want to pilot creative strategies like art to understand the impact on safety or perceptions of safety? Do you want to test out behavioral interventions like walking school buses aimed at improving safe travel behavior? I know these are pretty hot these days, so maybe this is why you're here. Are you interested in trying quick builds and installations and evaluating how they impact safety? Are you interested in using evidence-based, proven, safe routes to school strategies to address youth mobility, evaluating the impact, and using the data to make the case for ongoing investment? If you answered yes to any of those questions, great news. Safe Streets for All funding can help you achieve these things and more. So what is Safe Streets and Roads for All funding? And try as I may, I'm going to try not to use the acronym, but the acronym is SS4A, Safe Streets for All. So what is it? It is funding that gets awarded by the U.S. Department of Transportation for communities all across the country to develop and implement plans to achieve zero roadway traffic deaths. It was created in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So it's new. It was created at November 2021. And again, the express purpose of this funding is to prevent roadway fatalities and serious injuries. And importantly, for those of us on this call, it specifically calls out that it must include a focus on people walking and bicycling, vulnerable road users, people outside of cars. How much money are we talking? There's at least $5 billion over 5 years. And it funds planning grants, which is what we are going to focus on today. There are 3 types of planning grants. We're going to go into them in a lot of detail. And it focuses on implementation grants, which we're not going to talk about because the deadline has passed for this year. But tune in next year, we'll tell you all about them. So maybe you're thinking, like, I'm from a small town, I've never managed a transportation grant. Just honestly, you're saying these acronyms, DOT, SS4A, this all sounds complicated. I implore you to stick with me. Safe Streets for All funding, the application for this is as easy as a federal grant opportunity gets. We'll talk more about this later on, but if you're applying for a project, a planning grant for less than $1 million, we're talking a 2-page narrative. That's like a 7th grade homework assignment. You can do this. We know that often the 20% match is an impediment for communities to apply for transportation funds. A wonderful thing about this funding is that it allows for in-kind match, which doesn't mean it doesn't have to be cash. And we'll talk again more about this later. The other absolutely unique thing about this funding source is that it has been awarded to all or almost all eligible applicants for planning grants the last 2 years. I am not a betting person, but if I was, I would bet on my community's ability to win one of these grants. And it is May 21st. This is due on August 29th. You have plenty of time. And we know, because of the way that transportation law and funding happens, that this will be around for 2 more years. But because it's administered through the US DOT, it's subject to change if there's a change in presidential administration. So I like to think of this as a bit of a transportation funding unicorn. When I was preparing, what am I going to tell our amazing Safe Routes to School and active transportation community about Safe Streets for All? It's always important to look at what we have learned so far. And the great news is we have 2 years of data. And as of last Friday, we have the first information and we can glean some lessons from the first round of 2024. So this is really like 2+ years of Safe Streets for All lessons. So over the first 2 years, $1.7 billion has been awarded to over 1,000 communities, which means that almost 70% of our country's population is covered by a Safe Streets for All grant. For those of you who are not in big cities, I grew up in a cornfield in rural Pennsylvania. I took 2 school buses to get to school. I know the feeling of this transportation money is not for my community. And let's look at what the data tell us. This money is not just for big cities. Rural communities account for half of recipients. And I know if you're from a small town like where I grew up, you're saying $50,000. That is basically New York City to where I grew up. I hear you, but we can look at the map together later and you'll see that it's for small towns too. And it's manageable for first-time recipients of federal funding. 3/4 of recipients for the first 2 years were new direct recipients of US Department of Transportation funds. What did we learn on Friday with the release? So there are 3 deadlines for the 2024 Safe Streets for All grant. The first one was due in April, so props to everyone who was so on top of it that they got it in. They just found out on Friday whether or not they were awarded. So what we know about this whole year for 2024 is that there's at least $461 million available to the planning and demonstration grants, which is what we're talking about today. Round 1 was announced on Friday. They awarded $64 million to 99 communities across 34 states. So for those of you pulling out your pencil and paper, there's still $397 million remaining for the second 2 rounds. The second round, the deadline was on Thursday. So those of us on this call, we are saddled up and ready to rock for the round 3 deadline, which is August 29th. Another new thing for this year is that DOT is prioritizing funding for communities that have high rates of roadway fatalities. And they are defining that as more than 17 per 100,000. And this is a clickable link, and I haven't even opened the chat, but I'm confident that there are at least a couple of people asking if I'll share the slides. And we always share our slides on our website. We'll also share a webinar recording. This, you'll be able to click and see if your community has a high rate of traffic injuries and fatalities. Okay, so we've talked big picture about what this funding is for, how it's been awarded. Let's talk about what it is and what it enables you to do. A comprehensive safety action plan is the core of Safe Streets for All funding. This is the first step. If your community, or we'll talk a little bit more about this later, we can answer questions about it, a higher level jurisdiction covering your community. So maybe you are from a town and your county has a comprehensive safety action plan. But if your community doesn't have a comprehensive safety action plan, this is the opportunity for you. You apply to develop a comprehensive safety action plan. They sometimes go by other names. Maybe your community has a Vision Zero plan, or a tribal transportation safety plan, a local road safety plan. Those could count as comprehensive safety action plans. US DOT has really amazing step-by-step worksheets that help you figure out whether or not a plan you have constitutes a comprehensive safety action plan. But some of the key things that I'll just tell you off the bat, it must be community-wide, it must be multimodal, have to get down to the project and strategy level, and it's got to be current, has to have been published or updated since 2019. So if your community does not have a comprehensive safety action plan, this is the opportunity for you. And here are the 8 steps that you would apply to develop a comprehensive safety action plan, and it would need to include these things. Again, you might be feeling like this is overwhelming, but there's a whole community of practice. There are so many steps available for guiding you through that process, and your community can also contract help and support to develop these comprehensive safety action plans. So that's what they are. But let's really talk about why. Like, why does this exist and why would we even apply? Especially for those of us on this call that care about kids, walking and biking, our transportation system hasn't really been planned for us walking or pushing strollers or in wheelchairs. It has actively harmed communities of color, low-income communities. And so this is the opportunity to make sure that your community plans for safe, equitable, and connected mobility for people and mode users that haven't traditionally been included in planning. So that's the first opportunity. The second opportunity exists either as a standalone because your community already has a comprehensive action plan, or it can be done in conjunction with the original develop of a comprehensive safety action plan. And this is what USDOT is calling supplemental planning. And the intent here is to complete or enhance an action plan. So that slide I showed a couple slides ago showed these 8 things. Maybe you have a plan that has like 6 of those, but you don't have a mayoral commitment to reducing traffic deaths. You could work on supplemental planning to add in those components that you don't have. Or maybe, you know what, you really have not analyzed where people with disabilities are not able to access the sidewalk network. And so you need to go back through, you need to actually create a whole ADA transition plan. This is an opportunity for you to develop supplemental planning. And for those of you really interested in safe routes to school, I have a whole, we're going to go through the 6 E's and talk about all the opportunities based on whether it's a planning grant, a supplemental, or a demonstration project. So again, let's talk about the why. Like, why would we develop supplemental planning? So even when we use data to inform decision-making, we have to specifically focus on priority populations and modes and develop targeted strategies to improve safety for those users. So I gave the example of like, maybe your community already has a Vision Zero plan. You're like, okay, we're good. But then you start to scratch the surface and you figure out like, actually, once we start to look at this for a particular population, like this actually isn't taking into account our whole community or the most vulnerable population. So I live in Philadelphia, and several years ago, this city worked with the Pedestrian Bicycle Information Center to analyze youth pedestrian traffic crashes. And what they found was that even though they had this amazing, shiny, high injury network and all the resources were funneling into, let's improve safety on the high injury network, when they started to look at where kids were involved in crashes, they found that 61% of crashes involving kids walking occurred off of the city's high injury network. So what does that mean in practice? It means that if we are not cutting the data based on demographics or vulnerable road users, we might be systematically funneling all the resources to places that are not actually benefiting people walking, people with disabilities, etc. Okay, the third opportunity, honestly, this is the most fun one. This is demonstration projects. This is when you get to start trying things out, taking your plans, getting them onto the pavement, engaging people and figuring out, will this work? Will this not work? So this is really cool. And I think a couple of very important things to highlight here are that these can't be done in isolation. This still has to be part of developing a plan. So again, you can only apply for this if your community has a plan or is in the process of developing one, and this will inform the development. So maybe you're wondering like, okay, would a walking school bus actually like improve perceptions of safety? Would deploying crossing guards, hey, how about asphalt art? Does that actually work to slow traffic or reduce crashes? Like, let's put some paint down on the asphalt and see. So, why? Why do demonstration projects? Anybody on this call, I'm sure you know this, but change is hard, even when it's good, and demonstration projects provide a low-risk opportunity to try something out, engage people in change, and help them feel ownership over improvement. Okay, so we marketed this as very focused on advancing opportunities for safe routes to school and kids and communities. And so, as I mentioned, I want to highlight, given a bunch of examples rooted in the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School, of how you can advance your community's Safe Routes to School efforts, your community's commitment to safe, equitable, connected, active mobility for kids and their caregivers using this funding source. So let's talk about engagement. Again, you're gonna get these slides, and these are not the only opportunities. These are just things that came up as ideas. So engagement, your community could conduct supplemental planning focused on engaging youth, families, neighbors to understand perceptions of safety, barriers to active travel, and suggestions for improvement. You could use a demonstration grant to pilot engaging neighborhood residents to lead bike buses, and then capture quantitative data on the number of riders and qualitative data, so important, on perceptions of safety. This picture here is a project we did with Blue Zones Hawaii in Honolulu. We worked with them to engage community residents to figure out what treatments would improve safety at this intersection that had had many, many crashes in downtown Honolulu. And the community came up with painting the inside of these curb bump outs. And so it was an amazing community engagement opportunity. And it had the added result of decreasing the number of crashes at this intersection. So that is the type of thing that you can do with this funding. Something that I know is of interest to our community is alternatives to conventional traffic enforcement. That is something that you can do with this funding. You could conduct supplemental planning to develop civilian traffic enforcement, or you could create demonstration projects focused on assessing equitable and effective enforcement, like alternatives to traffic fines and fees. I know this is an area of interest for the Safe Routes community. Here's some funding to tinker with and figure out what could work in your community. Another E, encouragement. So again, I could have put 20 different ideas under here. I'm just putting one just to spark some creativity. You could pursue a demonstration grant to place crossing guards at each school on a community-wide walk to school day and capture before and after data on the number of students and community members walking, perceptions of safety. Education, you could use a demonstration grant to try new versions of safety campaigns, develop targeted messages. Corey and many of our partners led an amazing webinar last week on engaging students with disabilities. Here's a way to pilot adaptive education, identify what specific barriers students with disabilities are having to access school. We talked about artistic installations. You can use demonstration grants to hold pop-up safety events, bike rodeos. I know there's so much interest in our community in traffic gardens, open streets events. Baltimore is using Safe Streets for All funding for ciclovias. Evaluation. So I know that this is often the neglected E within the Safe Routes to School community, and this is a very important E in Safe Streets for All. All these demonstration grants these demonstration ideas that I'm sharing with you, they must have a research question. They must be evaluated. You have to evaluate before and after intervention. So Safe Routes community, I know you know how to evaluate impact, and here is an opportunity to use this funding to do so. You could also use supplemental planning funds to conduct bike ped counts, roadway safety inventories, sidewalk inventories, all kinds of stuff. Equity. This is a photo of some work that Corey did in Ward 7 in Washington, D.C., really working with middle schoolers in a predominantly low-income Black neighborhood in D.C. to understand what their concerns were related to traffic safety and create targeted messaging and use entrepreneurship as a way to engage their fellow middle schoolers and larger community in traffic safety and Vision Zero. So there is just so much that you can do that's really focused on elevating people and voices and neighborhoods that have historically not been involved in either identifying challenges or coming up with solutions. Hey, here's what we want for our neighborhood. So again, a number of opportunities here. Conduct supplemental planning to analyze where crashes are occurring involving youth of color, people with lower incomes, people with disabilities. You can pilot strategies using demonstration grants. We talked about maybe your community is not ADA compliant. What would it look like to pilot ADA compliance? And then how do you use that to build toward a more permanent model? Engineering, often the easiest E, maybe. I mean, there are just so many opportunities here. Again, this falls short, but you can develop a comprehensive safety action plan that identifies safety concerns for youth mobility and includes targeted strategies to reduce crashes involving kids. Supplemental activities. This one is so important. Everybody, if you're not paying attention, here, I want you to pay attention for a second. You can develop a Safe Routes to School action plan as a supplement to your community's comprehensive safety action plan. You can apply and say Our community has the Vision Zero plan, but we want to create a community-wide Safe Routes to School action plan to chart the course for funding, priorities, project strategies to move the needle on Safe Routes to School. We know that Safe Routes to School is effective at reducing traffic injuries and fatalities, but we haven't had like a community-wide plan. Folks, this is your opportunity. A number of other things. I don't want to just read my slides at you. Demonstration activities you can do for engineering. You can create a bike lane using flex posts. And the great news is you don't have to take them out at the end of this grant, even though they're temporary. You just have to evaluate how this impacts safety and perceptions of safety and mode choice, et cetera. You can slow traffic speeds near schools using removable traffic calming tools and other removable safety devices. Okay, so I went through a lot of these already, so I'm not gonna go through them entirely, but I wanted to make a list here of creative uses of Safe Streets for All funds to advance safe routes to school goals. And again, like, you all work in communities, you have amazing ideas. Like, DOT is encouraging people to think big, so I want you to think big too. Okay, I talked a lot about you need to know if your community has a comprehensive safety action plan to know whether that's what you need to apply for, or if you can apply for the supplemental and demonstration. Here is a link, here's a map that shows who's been funded and where, and here are links. Again, I promise you're gonna get these, but here are links where you can search whether or not your community has gotten funding and what they've gotten funding for. Okay, who is eligible to apply? To all my nonprofit friends on the phone, I am sorry, we are not eligible to apply. I know it stinks, but guess what? You can work with a community and they can write you in as a partner. So who is eligible? Cities, towns, counties, metropolitan planning organizations, federally recognized tribes, and groups of those entities. So a group of counties could apply. The way that this is written in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, the NOFO, is that you must be a political subdivision of a state. A lot of school districts are political subdivisions of a state and therefore can apply for these funds. Many health departments are political subdivisions of a state, can apply. State universities. Here's the thing, every state is different. You are going to have to figure out for your state whether or not you are a political subdivision of a state. But for the most part, cities, towns, counties, MPOs, regional planning organizations can apply. If you are not eligible as an applicant, there's still a role to play. Like, encourage your community to apply. This is only the third year of this funding. And for anybody following along at home, there was so much funding created in infrastructure law, so many new programs, it's honestly hard to keep track. Maybe your community does not have this on their radar. Make sure they know about this. You can talk with eligible applicants about applying. And as I mentioned, you can pitch a role for yourself. Just because you can't be the lead applicant doesn't mean you can't be involved in a funded capacity. You have value to bring. You may have the community relationships. You may be excellent at data collection or analysis. You might be running a really amazing Safe Routes to School program that needs more resources, and this is a way to inject more resources to supplement your planning, supplement your community's planning, or conduct demonstration activities. I'm a visual learner. We created a flow chart for you to help you figure out, like, okay, planning grant, supplemental, demonstration, can't keep them all straight. We created this so that you can follow along and figure out which opportunity is the best for your community. Okay, tips for applying. I talked earlier about how this is as easy as a federal grant opportunity gets. And when you go to USDOT's website and all the info is on the next page, you will see that they want to help you be successful. There are worksheets, there are checklists, there are links to help you get the answers to the questions they want. There's so much hand-holding for this opportunity. So some of the things the big thing is you need to nail the narrative. Do an amazing job crafting a compelling story of why your community needs to improve traffic safety. Here are 5 or 6 things that DOT lays out. These come from statute, they're in the guidance, they're in the notice of funding opportunity. How is the planning, supplemental planning, or demonstration project that your community is applying for going to reduce traffic injuries and fatalities, including for vulnerable road users? And that's one of the things they specifically call out, including for vulnerable road users. Folks on this call, you are those people. You know how to improve safety for people walking and biking. How are you going to engage with stakeholders? Again, hey, Safe Routes to School community, you're not new at this. You are out in your communities talking with people. You have a role to play. How will you incorporate innovative technology and strategies to promote safety? And I'm so excited in a minute to pass it off to somebody who can talk to you about some innovative technology and strategies that you can use in your communities to promote safety and walking and biking and joy. Here are some of the other things that they want you to address in your narrative. It also asks you to quantify the safety challenge. They ask you, what is the average annual fatality rate? And then they provide a link where it will take you to where you can find it for your community. Same for percentage of the population in underserved communities. This is a Justice 40 eligible program, which means that at least 40% of the funds need to benefit communities that have been made vulnerable by historic and contemporary transportation funding and policy decisions. So focus on equity. How are you going to, we know that there are horrible inequities in who gets hit and injured and killed walking and bicycling. This is a way to make strides in overcoming those inequities. So a really critical thing too is you need to coordinate with other recipients in your geography. Only one application can come from each eligible geography. So it can't be like, oh, the police department and the public health department are both applying from town X. Like there can be one application. So this is why I also really want you to look at those lists of who has applied and then get out in your community and chat, like, who are other people applying? How can we coordinate? You'll see on the next slide, like you can apply for up to $10 million for planning. Like there's more than enough money to go around. I said this before, I'm going to say it again. Consider how you can sub-award to partners. Write in your partners, write in people who will help you be successful at delivering on this project. I talked about creativity on match. So in-kind match means that you can quantify the value of things like staff time, volunteer time. Maybe you have parents who serve as walking school bus leaders. You could quantify the value of their time and count it as toward your local match to reduce the amount of cash that your community needs to put up to access these funds. It also means space. Maybe you're engaging community members and a local rec center is providing space. You can quantify the value of that space rental and count it towards your local match. Okay, so again, hand by hand, holding your hand, step by step, whatever I'm trying to say. Here's how you apply for Safe Streets for All. You need to determine whether or not your community has been awarded. There's a link there. There's a link further back in the slides. Again, if you haven't been awarded or your community doesn't have a comprehensive safety action plan, that is your starting point. Without that, you can't do the other things. You need to coordinate with existing awardees. So again, I live in Philadelphia. Our Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO, has received an award for our whole MPO. So we would have to coordinate with the MPO and say, like, we both know what each other are working on. I put a link in here to the notice of funding opportunity. I reiterated who the eligible applicants are. Here's a checklist for the planning grant. I want to make sure that you are considering partners. Oh God, sorry, peeps. Partners that you can include. And again, the funding range. So the minimum that you can ask for is $100,000, which is a lot of money. And then the maximum that you can ask for is $10 million. So there's a lot of room here. And then the deadline for this application is August 29th. So there's plenty of time to apply. So I know that before we turn it over to Love to Ride, who I'm so excited, they have really innovative technology that is so engaging and fun and joyful and supportive of Safe Routes to School and can be used for Safe Streets for All planning and supplemental grants and demonstration projects. I want to share that we know that as much as we try to break this down to make it feel very action-oriented and accessible for your community, that every community is unique. And so I just want to offer that here at the Safe Routes Partnership, we are here to help. We want you to be successful accessing these funds. This is a generational investment in transportation safety, and we cannot afford to miss this moment and not have kids planned for in transportation safety planning. So we'll drop a link in the chat. We have an open calendar where you can schedule time with our team to talk about the questions that you have specific to your specific to your community. And with that, I am so excited to welcome Thomas Stokel from Love to Ride. He is the CEO of Love to Ride. My computer is going crazy and I've lost his bio, but Thomas, can I pass it over to you?
Yeah, no sweat. Awesome. Thank you,
Sorry.
Melissa. Great to be with you all today. Melissa and I met at a conference earlier this year, and we got talking about our tools that we use to collect data more efficiently and more easily that enable people to give feedback to their local transportation planners about the parts of their routes that they feel the most unsafe on when they're biking or walking. So making it easier for people to contribute to planning and identifying the parts of the network that are most in need of improvement. And we got talking about how this would obviously be useful for Safe Routes to School programs and how it'd be a great use of this SS4A funding. So we've been talking to a lot of Safe Routes to School folks from across the country, and I wanted to share with you briefly today the things that we're learning about the challenges that you all are facing when it comes to data collection, and a quick introduction to how we can help as an example of something that you can apply for with this funding. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you all a couple of slides. Awesome. Can you see what I see here?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. These are my lovely kids here on the way back home from school. This is obviously something that's very near and dear to my heart as someone who travels actively with my kids. A quick introduction to Love to Ride. We provide transportation professionals with the digital tools and the data that they need. We work with cities, NPOs, and organizations of all sizes to encourage and support more people to bike and gather that data for the planning process and for evaluation and measuring the effectiveness of your work. So our goals are to help all schools have safe routes to school. We want to save you all time. We know that you all are busy, and there are some things that we can do to help save you all some time. We also want to make it easier for parents to have their voices heard. We know they can't always, make themselves available for a safe streets audit on a weekend, for example. And of course, we want to improve the quality and the quantity of the data that is collected and used to make our streets safer. And as Marisa mentioned, we need to make sure that our quiet streets that lead to schools get this data that shows that there are unsafe areas that need to be improved, not just our main roads with most of the accidents. So one of the ways that data is collected at the moment is these road safety audits, which are, of course, time intensive. Not all, it's hard to get around to all the schools every year. And of course, there isn't always high parent engagement, and parents can't always afford to spend a couple of hours on a weekend, attending one of these. So we want to make it easy and fun for parents, schools, and Safe Routes teams to get feedback and give feedback via an app. You can see on my screen here, I can say I felt pretty safe and comfortable going down this quiet street on my way to school to this main road here. There is a painted bike lane here, which is okay, it's kind of narrow, but then it disappears. And that's when I feel pretty unsafe with my kids on the bike going the rest of the way to school. So that's obviously one area that the city might not know about, that now they have some data to help support making the case for some improvement. By making an app, anyone can download the app. You don't need to make yourself available on the weekend, have your voice heard. And of course, this data is digitized on entry. You don't have to worry about paper forms, paper maps, and spending weeks digitizing them. And of course, then we can provide all kinds of views showing the most common routes people are taking to get to schools, the parts of those routes that are the most unsafe that can be prioritized for investment and for spending. So we can use this data to identify these problematic areas and make the case for investment. And of course, measure before we put in a bike lane or something, improve the sidewalk, improve the crossing, and then after, and how did that impact the safety that people experience as they get to school. How can we get the data? Well, we can engage the parents and the students who are already biking and already walking to school. They know the local routes, they use them daily, and we know they arrive at the school gate, and we can engage them in the morning, for example. We can encourage them to help us to improve the route to school. We could, for example, do a national prize for a trip to Disney. I think that would get some people's attention. And then, of course, they use the app to simply paint with their finger. I felt safe here. I felt unsafe here. So really easy to get more parents and more kids involved in helping make their communities safer. We've heard from a lot of programs, Safe Routes to School programs, saying, they can support 5 or 10 schools a year with one of these audits. And if you have 80 schools, it might take 5 to 10 years to get around to all those schools. So we want to make sure that we can help to get around to those schools that might be 10 years away much, much sooner. So if we could, get this data at as many schools in the district as we can, then we can identify the 2 or 3 most unsafe parts of the network, give that to the city, and they can then prioritize those most problematic areas for investments. So a lower lift for these schools to get the data, a lower lift for parents and for y'all. So just lastly, obviously the funding here can be used to collect this data. And we have community engagement people. We hire people all over the country, local people, to go out and do this data collection. Of course, you've got staff time or volunteers potentially that could help, but there's funding here to make this easy for y'all. And of course, doing the data analysis and giving these mapped outputs. So scan this QR code or go to about.lovetoride.net/safe routes to school. We've got a 4-page PDF that you can download. And we've also got this presentation that you can also download there and share it with colleagues. My colleague Laura is also speaking to lots of people around the country. We'll be happy to talk to you if you'd like to learn more about how you could include this in your application for Safe Routes for All. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Thomas. And as Thomas mentioned, we were so excited to connect. I think the Safe Streets for All opportunity has really sparked for us. What are ways that we can take advantage? How we build new partnerships, identify new technologies, and particularly this question of engaging people, collecting data, making sure we have the before and after. That was really so exciting to learn about, Love to Ride, and how that might be a tool for Safe Routes to School practitioners, their communities to involve in their Safe Routes to School work or Safe Streets for All pursuits. So with that, I want to make good on the commitment to have longer than average time for questions and answers. And please, I know many of you are putting them into the question and answer box. Some of you are putting them in the chat. If you can put them in the Q&A module, that helps. That's a little bit easier for us to keep track. So lots of you are asking if we're going to share the slides. Yes, we are, which is great. Okay, so somebody asked about whether or not, does it matter if we are a small community? So one of the things that I didn't say that is very important to know is that there's $5 billion available. They originally had it like $1 billion per year, but they haven't gotten enough applications. So there's funding rolled over. So that's in addition to like the need for safety planning in all types of communities. There's been fewer applications than there is money available. That being said, DOT does say that if they look at whether or not you're a rural community, they want this to not only go to big cities. So it does say like in very competitive situations, they will take into account communities of all sizes. And as I mentioned earlier, like they want the whole country covered. That includes rural communities. So small communities, you can do this. And many communities are hiring consultants to write their comprehensive safety action plans. Just to be candid with you, like the community, it doesn't have to do it by itself, or it can use tools like Love to Ride. It's like, okay, this is going to help us with our data collection. You can hire partners, sub-award to partners to help you deliver on this work. Okay, somebody is asking if our community has a tribal transportation safety plan, but it hasn't been updated since 2019, can we apply for funds to help bring it up to date? Yes, this could be done as either an original planning grant, or you could do it as a supplement if there are pieces that need to be brought up to date. But yes, that's absolutely an eligible use of these funds. Okay, another question. Our communities are interested in and starting transportation safety planning, but are hesitant to make the commitment to zero traffic deaths. Can you speak to how much weight this commitment has in the Safe Streets for All grant? Any tips for getting officials to make the commitment? Okay, so I don't have my slides up anymore, but one of the factors of a comprehensive safety action plan does require a commitment to zero traffic deaths. I will say there are communities and states that have been hesitant to make that very firm commitment. And so they say like towards zero traffic deaths, which I think is eligible. And a process like this of developing a comprehensive safety action plan, really using the data to identify where the crashes are happening. And in this particular case, like tips for getting officials to make the commitment, maybe this is where you do some supplemental planning to really capture narratives. Maybe you work with your local Families for Safe Streets chapter to not have this, but like, yes, this is a data-driven exercise, but maybe you use some of the funding to really put the human face, tell the story of these people, make it not just a number. These are the people. How do you use some of that messaging and communication strategy to pull on the emotional heartstrings of your elected officials, of the public in your community, to build the political will to make that commitment? So I actually think this is a really great funding opportunity because you can do you must do the data-driven piece, but then you also can do community engagement to really build that political will. Okay, here's another question. If our community already received a comprehensive safety action planning grant in 2022, can we still apply for a demonstration grant this year or next year, or does it have to be within a year of the planning grant? Oh my gosh, you can apply. That's the demonstration grant is intended to inform the development of a comprehensive safety action plan. So maybe you're in the process of, so you got it in 2022, props to you for being on top of it, applying in year one, but we know that none of the SS4A comprehensive safety action plans are done yet. So you can apply for a planning grant this year or next year. But I would say, why not do it this year? There's money available. So that's absolutely eligible and encouraged. I think that's really great. Okay, somebody said, how many Safe Streets for All planning projects may a city apply for in one application period? So a city or any eligible entity may only apply for one planning project. That being said, you can bundle planning projects together. So you could say, it's just like, you can't submit two separate applications. You can't say like, here's our planning application and here's our demonstration application. You say, here is, we want to develop a comprehensive safety action plan, and we want to pilot bike buses and flex posts and asphalt art. We want to try all of those. You can apply for those as one joint application, and that constitutes one application that you may apply for together. And again, like DOT is really encouraging people to think big, think comprehensively, think about engagement, think about data collection, all kinds of stuff. Okay, another wonderful question. Keep them coming, folks. So if funds are applied for and received, what is the time frame for funds to be expended? So you have up to 5 years to deliver. You have your grant agreement is up to 5 years. Okay, let's see. So somebody is saying they completed a school route analysis for 2 cities in their county. Can they apply for this grant to help fund recommendations that came out of this analysis? So what we talked about today are just the planning category. Anything that constitutes implementation, like permanent infrastructure, concrete, the deadline has passed. You can apply next year. If you are interested in rolling a safe routes analysis into a community-wide comprehensive safety action plan, and then using demonstration funding to try out some of those recommendations, you could do that. Or if your community, again, I don't know where you are, but if your community has a comprehensive safety action plan, you could pilot, and safe routes is part of it. You could pilot some of the recommendations as part of a project. And this is an area, again, where I'll say, like, we know that every single one of your communities is unique. We would love to answer your specific questions. It's hard to do with just one line of questioning, but we have, we'll make sure that you have the link to sign up, and you can grab some time with our staff to ask your community's specific questions. Okay, sorry. Okay, somebody said, what are the deadlines for planning grants? So the deadline to apply for a planning grant is this August. If you're asking about if your community already got funding and it's the planning grant the action planning isn't happening yet, it may just be in the works. Again, a lot of people are hiring help, issuing RFPs. Maybe it hasn't gotten underway yet. If it's your community's first time managing these funds, maybe they've taken some time to work through the grant agreement process with USDOT. Okay, let's see. So somebody's asking, can school districts and cities partner on applications, or does the school district need to take the lead for Safe Streets for All grants? So definitely the city could be the lead. If in your state, a school district is a political subdivision of a state, the school district could apply, but it depends on your state. The city could definitely apply, and the city could say, okay, we're going to apply for $500,000, and we are going to, I mean, it depends on what specifically you're asking about, but the school district could be a sub-awarded funded partner. Okay, here we go. If your county has funding already, can you still apply as a town within the funding as a supplemental? Yes, you can. You need to, in your application, so they have a whole area on their website where it says like coordination among multi-jurisdictions. I don't know, it's on their website. But basically what they say is you need to connect with the county. Your supplemental planning, so let's just use, say you want to apply, your county has a comprehensive safety action plan grant that they have started, and you want to apply for a safe route to school action plan supplement to that county plan. You need to connect with the county and say like, hey, like, what are you guys working on? This is what we want to work on, so that in your application, you can tell USDOT, we have communicated with our county. We know they're working on this. We are working on this that will supplement their plan. Okay. Somebody's asking, if our county has already submitted this year, can we apply in August? Unfortunately, no. The good news is there will be 2 more years of funding. Okay, sorry, I'm going back up. There are a lot of questions in here. Okay, so somebody's asking if preliminary engineering plans and everything required for construction is eligible for SS-FRA planning and demonstration grants. That is not. as far as I know, I can double check, but I was reading this last night and I think the answer is no. For demonstration grants, you can do NUTCD engineering studies though. Okay, let's see. Somebody's asking, can transit agencies apply? This goes back to this like state by state situation. If your transit agency is a political subdivision of the state, then they may apply. Okay, somebody's asking where they can find the link to the application. So it is in the slide deck, and I will also put it in the chat right now. So here is the link if you want to apply. Okay, somebody's asking, can you use this funding for safe routes to parks? We have a park that's next to a school and has unsafe walking conditions. Is there a difference in these safe routes applications? So with Safe Streets and Roads for All, when you're developing the comprehensive safety action plan, it has to be community-wide, it has to be multimodal. And so from that standpoint, it's broader than a specific destination. If you are working on a supplemental plan, you could focus on, hey, we really want to look at what are some of these trip generators for kids and older adults, and what are the safety concerns near them? You could apply for a supplemental grant to do that type of analysis. Okay, somebody is asking, how would a bike rodeo qualify for the grant? So as much as I have focused on this like comprehensive safety action plan, because that really is the core, the foundation, USDOT is really encouraging people to think about traffic safety broadly, and that it's not solely focused on engineering. And there's a ton of information on their website about how you can use this funding for behavioral interventions, educational campaigns. And one of the ways that I was thinking about that is doing a pop-up. So you could, perhaps there's like two ways to do this. So one could be as part of your supplemental planning, if you're working on safe routes to school, this is a way to engage people. Maybe you haven't really figured out how to engage parents in a particular neighborhood, maybe holding a bike rodeo in that neighborhood and then using that as a way while the kids are learning their bike skills, you're talking with the parents, or they're swiping on Love to Ride. It's like, oh, actually, we never bike because this area is terrifying. So that's why we don't bike. So you could use it as an engagement strategy or as a demonstration project. You could say, we think that one of the main reasons that people aren't biking, or there have been a number of injuries of children bicycling, is there's not enough bicycle education. So we're going to have a pop-up bike rodeo where we're trying some new strategies. So that would be a way that you can incorporate a bike rodeo into your Safe Streets for All planning grant. Okay, I know there were a lot of applications. So somebody asked, do we know when the implementation grant for next year starts? So these have typically come out in the early part of the year. So February, I believe, is when they came out this year, February 24th. So they tend to follow similar cycles. So I'd say like look for it shortly in the beginning of 2025. But it's a good thing to know go on the website this year and figure out what you'll need to apply and get the partners, get the people. Okay, folks, thank you. I know this has been a lot of information, and I just want to reiterate two things. We at the Safe Routes Partnership are here to help you be successful. It is so important to me that we are using this $5 billion investment to plan for safe, equitable, connected mobility for kids. This money is available. Take hold of it. We're here to help. And also, again, thanks so much to Thomas for conversation and brainstorming ways that this technology can be used to support the creation of safer communities, safer places for folks to walk and bike. We will send out the recording and the slides. And For those of you who are used to our webinars, we're doing things a little bit differently this time. When you close out of Zoom, there's an immediate survey. We really ask that you do take that. It helps us create educational resources and tools and provide information that is helpful for you. Thank you so much, all of you. Good luck on your Safe Streets for All applications. We're here to help if you need us. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.